Welcome back to Daily Flash. The shortage of infant formula has reached critical levels in some areas. Current shortages are the result of supply chain issues and the recent voluntary recall of certain baby formula products. This has been causing concern for many new moms and moms-to-be. With us today is KELLAM, the president of the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine and professor of pediatrics at the University of Virginia, with some recommendations to help support the safety and health of mothers, infants, and children. And thank you so much for joining us. This is such an important topic. I'm glad we can cover that today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned, this has been a very big story, and I'm sure there's lots of expectant moms who are watching and the news, and they're afraid. What is your advice for those who are currently pregnant or expecting?
First and foremost, I think right now our priority obviously needs to be those families who are reliant on formula to feed their babies. However, that being said, if I were pregnant or expecting, we don't do a great job right now of supporting breastfeeding families where two-thirds of the women who deliver in the United States do not reach their personal breastfeeding goals. So if I were pregnant or expecting, this would be one of the pieces of information that I would factor into my decision. And I would be seeking education, support, help, lining up a birthing center or hospital that is supportive of breastfeeding, lining up a pediatrician or family doctor for my baby that is knowledgeable and supportive about breastfeeding, finding out what my resources are, because breastfeeding is a team sport. It takes all of us, it takes our support people, it takes cheerleaders, and it takes a system that's set up to help new mothers.
That's right. I'm glad you touched on that statistic too. About two-thirds are not reaching their breastfeeding goals. I know there's a lot of ignorant statements that would come out, like, why don't people just breastfeed? And obviously, that's not always an option for everyone. So what about new moms who are not breastfeeding but relying on formula to feed their infants? What is your advice for them?
Right. Well, I know you are doing the best you can. And I know, we're here to support you in whatever way you're feeding your baby. And right now, the priority is making sure that you can feed your baby safely. And so, you know, there are some recommendations on the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine website, which would be helpful, but I'll go over a few right now. One is, you know, try to put in the bottles only what you think your baby will take at that meal, because whatever is not taken out of that bottle, you have to discard. You can always add a little more if your baby's still hungry. We also recommend it's okay to use different brands of formula. I know some people get very wed to a certain kind of formula that they're using, but unless your baby has special medical needs, it is safe to use other brands. I recommend, reaching out to your local resources, because there are pockets of places and stores that have more than others, or they get a shipment in that day. So take pictures of it, share. Again, it takes a village to raise a baby. And so use that information. And I know it's much harder on families with fewer resources and transportation issues and work issues. And so again, help each other out, take turns being the ones to venture out to get these products.
That's right, and that's great advice. And another option I know is donor milk. And in your last answer, you touched a lot on safety. And there's some people who may be hesitant, or they're not sure. Is donor milk a good option? What do moms need to know about that?
Sure. Well, I think one thing just to think about is that this is something that we used to do as human beings for centuries. However, we know now that safety wise, you really want the donor to have been tested for all of the transmissible infections, and you want the donor to be screened for what medications are you on? Is there anything that would get into breast milk that could be a risk? We want to know, are you using any substances, again, that could impact the health and well-being of the baby. So it's not something you want to go into lightly. It's a very special, intimate relationship, and we recommend getting donor milk through certified donor milk banks rather than just informal sharing, and
Right.
certainly not purchasing on the internet.
Oh, yes. No, definitely not that. And in this age, speaking of internet, I'm glad you said that. In this age, there is so much sharing of information on the internet, and people with they want to help, they're trying to put a good foot forward. But what about homemade infant formula recipes? We see a lot of those shared.
Right. So we know that homemade formula recipes used to be the only thing we had. And actually, there were problems. And I know that some people are, full grown adults and they survived fine, but they're the ones that didn't have the problems. And so it's risky to make your own formulas. It's risky to use other animal milk products, and it's risky to use any vegetable milk, soy or almond milk, for example. We don't recommend doing any of those things, and certainly do not mix the formula differently than is on the package, like watering it down
Right.
to make it last longer. All of those things can lead to even severe consequences for your baby.
You
So
don't want that.
we don't recommend doing any of those things. And if you find yourself ever in that situation, you want to do that with somebody in the healthcare profession, following your baby very closely for iron deficiency and micronutrient deficiency and concentrations in their blood.
So important. And any last words of advice, especially for our viewers watching at home who this is very tangible information for them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is just it takes a village. And so, um, on the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine website, we do have some information about how communities and governments and women who are currently breastfeeding can be helping this
Excellent.
situation. And also, just take care of yourself too, because it's hard enough to
Such good
have a new
advice.
baby, right?
That's right. So, where can we go for more information?
I would recommend going to the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine website, bfmed.org, and we can.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us with this important information. We'll be back with more Daily Flash.